Okay, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we're going to have a sneak peek at what's going on in the horizons of air taxis, mobility, traffic management. I would like to welcome our session chair here, Parimal Kopardekar from NASA. We were talking out in the hall. It was a really interesting time. He goes, well, where are you from? I said, well, you know, I'm at Moog. I'm out in Buffalo, New York. And he was like, oh, I went to school at UB. And I was like, well, very cool. So he's out at Ames. And what's even neater is his daughter's actually going to school here at Case Western. So pretty awesome. So not only did we get him on the panel, but he got to come out and see his daughter, which is even cooler. So with that, PK, take it away.
All right, thank you for that introduction. For the first time in probably my 20 years of career at NASA, I'm pretty nervous about talking in front of public because I never had opportunity to talk in front of my daughter. So I'm really excited to be with you all. And thank you for Glenn Research Center as well as AIS to invite and set up this panel. Usually the airspace management and traffic management is set up on the last day of the conference, sort of in the also ran category, you know. But now things have changed and airspace integrations become very, very critical part of what we do. So I will share with you, as a public service announcement, I'll share with you what we are doing at NASA, then we'll go to the panelists. But before I do that, I would like to share with you my enthusiasm about the panelists themselves. So we have two distinguished panelists. The first is David Oord, who is the policy manager, OORD, that's his last name, but so OO is a good way to say it. David Oord is the policy manager at Wisk. He is focused on all-electric, self-flying aircraft, and his focus is most of his energies on strategies to shape the legislative, regulatory, and acceptance-related aspects of autonomous systems and their safe integration. Prior to joining Wisk, he was at Lilium, another similar basically minded company. He was also at AOPA, which is Airline Owners and Pilots Association. He's a pilot himself, and he also has managed airport. He also had a stint with Experimental Aircraft Association. So he has quite a bit of background in the regulatory aspects and certification aspects. And now he's focused on autonomous systems, which is really great to see that push. Our second distinguished panelist is Fred Judson, who is an icon in Ohio. He is the director of Ohio Department of Transportation, all things related to US. He does DriveOhio, and I think soon it's going to be FlyOhio. But he has 27 years of experience. Past 7 years, he's been focused on advanced air mobility, drones, and electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. So with that introduction, I'm going to quickly offer some comments about what NASA is doing in the advanced air mobility. So NASA has Advanced Air Mobility Project, which is part of the airspace operations and safety programs at all 4 NASA Aeronautics centers contribute to that. Ames, Armstrong, Glenn, and Langley on various aspects of the advanced air mobility, and I'll share with you. So if we look at why we are doing advanced air mobility, because a number of technologies are emerging. So one is the battery is getting better, so electric propulsion is better. That means you can be quieter as opposed to the current helicopter. So once you are quieter, you can increase your reach of aviation into places where aviation has not seen before. My personal dream is to have aviation reach every zip code in the world. So that's kind of the power of now electrified aircraft and sustainable aviation that brings you. So we have a bunch of use cases. You will see them here. Of course, the regional cargo transport with short takeoff and landing with sort of fixed wing. Then you have vertical takeoff and landing related ones that are related to these drones that you have seen pictures and animations, and as well as actual drones operating. Then in urban passenger transport, as well as public goods use cases for emergency responses, as an example. So here is a cluttered picture, and the reason I show this picture is it actually makes the point that airspace integration is critical to success. If you look at individual vehicles, so I started working on drone traffic management in 2012, and the drone companies were looking at that and saying, I don't see anybody in the airspace, why can't I go fly? And the reason is this, which is once you start one flying, there will be a whole bunch of them flying together, and then there are basically manned aviation. The current aviation that happens is helicopters, and lots of these other types of drones will be in the same airspace at the same time. How do you maintain the safety of the entire operations? How do you maintain the efficiency of the operations? That's the main problem we are focused on in the airspace integration. Now I'll talk a little bit about other challenges we are focused on as well. So we have a number of entrants, so this is not just a one company kind of a problem. There is an ecosystem of these advanced air mobility vehicles that are growing. Lots of jobs opportunities here. If you look at any of these companies and their websites, you'll find lots of jobs. But the best jobs are at NASA, usajobs.gov. That's where you find the best jobs. So we are focused on AM sustainability. Part of that sustainability, as you heard in the morning, is basically electrifying this aircraft that has zero emissions, but also quieter. That enables you to basically go to places where you haven't gone before, and acceptance problems go away. So at number of these vehicles, we are testing the noise profiles, we're testing what will it take to basically operate them in the urban setting when sometimes the communication are constrained, the GPS is constrained. What happens when there are different types of wind? So we do this testing, we do the analysis, simulation, modeling to make sure that these operations and the vehicles themselves will be safe and acceptable. One of the things to get to the affordability is autonomy, making sure that these vehicles can eventually self-operate. In the beginning, some of them will be operating with pilots, and then over a period of time, we want to reduce the dependence on pilot. There is always already a pilot shortage going on. And if you think about these vehicles and their basically scalability needs, you will need lots of pilots. So how do we tackle that? And the idea here is to have better human autonomy teaming with reduced dependence on humans to do safety-critical tasks. So that's also part of the sustainability. Other part of sustainability is looking at the entire basically life cycle that includes manufacturing, supply chain, maintenance, repair, overall, and other operations. These operations are very much regional, local, so every state will have their own vertiports and own basically maintenance, repair operations, because you need to make sure that vehicles can be fixed quickly when they need some maintenance or repair or overhaul and get back to air. So there are lots of opportunities in every location that is aspiring to go towards advanced air mobility. Now, in terms of NASA's research, what NASA does is set some requirements for how will they look like in the vehicle design itself. What are the basically systems that will make sure that the noise is low, the safety of these vehicles will be high. Airspace operations, how will they integrate with the rest of the aircraft, as well as helicopters and drones, make sure that they will be safe and they will not excessively burden the current air traffic control system. So a lot of my time, last 10 years, went into building unmanned aircraft system traffic management. We build basically a system which is digital, goes towards management by exception paradigm rather than depending on the clearances from air traffic control system, as well as using third-party systems and technologies from outside government to enable these operations. So we are going to expand that part as well in airspace design. Community integration, very critical in terms of safety, security, as well as noise. So those are the factors we look at. Now he just goes in, this slide just gives you a little bit more detail into what I showed you in the 3 pillars. Now here we have 5 different basically areas: airspace, design, and its implementation, community integration, aircraft itself, its development and production in terms of making sure that the production certification occurs properly, as well as the supply chain is set up properly. Then individual vehicle maintenance and management. One of the things that we focus on is contingency management. What happens if there is a bird strike along the way? What happens if basically energy depletes? How do we make sure that those systems are in place, the procedures are in place, and technology is in place? One of the areas that NASA Glenn is focused on here is communication, navigation, surveillance. What kind of systems we need to have in place. These vehicles are going to operate at 4,000 feet and below. So the conventional communication, navigation, surveillance method have to be adapted to these operations. NASA Langley is focused on noise models as well as the contingency management of the vehicles. NASA Ames is focused on the airspace integration, and NASA Armstrong, we put together all these pieces and do something called national campaign where we test these methods as well as entire end-to-end operation. So I'll stop here, and now I'm going to request David to be the next speaker to give an overview of what Wisk is doing. And then we'll go to Fred, and we'll have lots of questions. My goal is to not give Alan an opportunity to ask any question.
Oh, just bring it here. I'll just do it from here. We'll see if this works from here. Good afternoon, everyone. Just bringing up the slides. I originally wasn't going to do any videos, but then I saw some really awesome, inspiring videos before on a couple panels before, so wanted to try to add one. It might not work, but if not, you can just Google YouTube or YouTube Wisk, and we have plenty of videos online. Okay, here we go. So let's try. Shut autoplay. There we go.
Step into the future. You leap. And when we leap, imaginations become possibilities. Ideas become inventions. Innovations advance
Looks
all
like
of
it's not
humankind.
buffering. So just if you just go to YouTube, Google, or search for Wisk, Those Who Leap, you can see the video online. But let me see if this goes forward. I think we're paused. Apologies. Well, here, give it one more shot, then we'll go from there.
You leap. And when we leap, imaginations become possibilities. Ideas become inventions. Innovations advance all of humankind. The unknown transforms into the familiar. Courage becomes louder than fear. Opportunities fill the air. Because the sky is no longer the limit. The future of tomorrow begins with our leap. And yours. Are you ready to leap into the future?
Awesome. So first, starting off with the problem. So I think most of us commute, maybe not so much over the last couple of years, but I think, times are going back. We are going back. I mean, the fact that we can have an in-person event like this is useful. I think, definitely the Zoom conferences got us through a hard time, but nothing like personal human interaction. But there is significant time lost due to congestion. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and every time I go downtown, if we can just get rid of that little restricted airspace and not get shot down, I would love to take an air taxi downtown. So, but if you look at the nation's infrastructure, even though we just passed a pretty large infrastructure bill, there's just so much that roads, rail, subway, tunnel can do. It is extremely costly to put a mile of road. It's even more costly to put a mile of rail. And then you also have to, go through things, take out things. And so to really advance our nation's transportation network, we really need to move into that third dimension and move to the sky. We can put a vertiport at a fraction of a cost, and then the airspace is free. So the technology is there, like PK mentioned, and now is the time to do it. Vision of Wisk is less time getting there means more time being there. I think everyone, with friends, family can really relate to that. And then our mission is delivering safe, everyday flight for everyone. Two key things here is one, safety. Wisk is designing our aircraft to the highest level of safety. We will be comparable to a Part 25 aircraft, so think of a Boeing or an Airbus. Triple redundant, quadruple redundant systems on board, and then it'll be an integrated system, so we have components on the ground as well, connected in between, so it's more of an overall system. But then the second thing is everyone. We really don't want to be the operator or the aircraft that is flown by the uber rich to and from Manhattan to the Hamptons, but really something that everyone can use. Something that can be used for most people, comparable to an Uber and maybe an Uber Black to start, but then transitioning to an Uber XL, and then using it to move around your city, go where you want to go, when you want to go, and not be constrained by the traffic and the congestion. So really everyone. Who we are, we currently have about 425 people located mostly within engineering, but by all means, there are plenty of jobs posted on our website. So if you know of anyone that's going to be graduating from this fine institution or any other one and looking for an engineering job, by all means, check it out. Some new and exciting things. But we're also going to be manufacturing the aircraft, and we're also flight testing the aircraft. Flight testing it pretty much every day in California at the Hollister Airport, about an hour south of San Jose. But we also have been testing it extensively in New Zealand. So we have a large operation in New Zealand. New Zealand is really, as a country, has taken a whole of government approach, really leaned forward in this space and working on some really radical and innovative things for aerospace integration. So we're leveraging that and going to possibly operate in Asia Pacific as well, in addition to the U.S. A lot of patents obviously issued. One key differentiator with Wisk is full-scale aircraft flights. So we have, and I'll go over the generations of aircraft, but over 1,500 flights of our aircraft. We were one of the very first ones that transitioned from vertical to horizontal flight. So a lot of aviation pedigree, a lot of experience. And obviously the other thing about Wisk is we are a joint venture between the Boeing company and Kitty Hawk. Kitty Hawk was founded by Larry Page, the Google co-founder. So we have Larry Page on one side and the Boeing company on another. So we are a privately held joint venture, and we have some backing. A lot of you probably are new to the term of AAM, or Advanced Air Mobility. We've been around for a while, so it's not like we are a startup. We've been at this for over 12 years. You can see the current aircraft that we had on the video is our 5th generation aircraft. You can see the ones before that of various designs and iterations. Gen 2 or Gen 3, actually, I believe, had a pilot on board. Our Gen 4 and 5 are self-flying, so no pilot. And we have some exciting things coming down the pike with our Gen 6, so more to come on that later this year. So this is our current 5th generation aircraft. We call it Cora. It is, again, self-flying, no pilot on board, but again, it'll be closely monitored and on the ground. All electric. We have 12 independent lift fans, and then a pusher prop in the rear that transitions to forward flight, and then the lift translates from the lift fans to the wing. It is currently 2 passengers. The aircraft that we are going to be certifying with the FAA that our Gen 6 aircraft. I think our president and CEO spilled the beans on a recent 60 Minutes interview that you can see online, but we will have 4 passengers in that aircraft. Still self-piloted, remotely monitored, operating relatively low, 1,500 to 5,000 feet, 100 miles an hour, 25-mile range. So really focused on that urban air mobility. So looking at the inner cities, getting from suburbs to the inner city, airport to the downtown location, etc. As I mentioned, no single point of failure, ground control monitoring, and more. And again, that urban air mobility, not the regional air mobility. So we can integrate as we move forward. And technology matures, and we can go further. Just a quick thing about the Boeing relationship, really strengthened our partnership there, and we really feel that we are stronger together because they bring a lot of the experience. They've been in that space for over 30 years, very well versed with the FAA in the way to build an aircraft, get it certified, and so we're really leveraging that. We have a lot of people embedded in our program from the Aurora Flight Sciences Boeing company, the subsidiary of Boeing, and so they've been at that for a while. Also leveraging things like In Situ, which does a Scan Eagle, a drone, a remotely piloted aircraft, to use as a surrogate as we work on airspace integration and trial programs. Why autonomy, though? So as PK mentioned, a lot of the early adopters or the early innovators are going to be in the AAM space, are going to have a pilot on board. We like to say that we're not going to be the first to the market. We don't give a date, but we will confidently say that we're going to be the first to autonomy. And I think you need autonomy because, one, it's safer. If you look at the causal factors of most GA, general aviation, or commercial accidents, you rack and stack and put them on a Gantt chart, you have loss control by far and away the leading cause, followed by sys-component failure power plant, followed by controlled flight into terrain. By removing the pilot and creating a system that is safe and autonomous, you will remove almost all 3 of those and eliminate those risks. So you're going to dramatically improve the safety. And obviously, operating in an urban environment, safety is paramount. It also creates repeatability, predictability. It's going to be really needed for scale. There are not enough pilots to support this industry if we see it go where we all want to go, and so we really need autonomy to go there. Then lastly is operational cost. By removing the pilot and he or she, not that they're not valuable, I'm a pilot, I'm a commercial pilot, but by removing he or she from the cockpit, you really reduce the cost of the operation, then translating that to more accessibility, more equitable, more people can fly. What do we mean by autonomy, though? So it's not that the aircraft can just go fly where it wants to go. It'll be a very defined operation, but it's really leveraging what's already happening today. People fly on commercial airlines. Most of us probably flew here on a commercial airline. The autopilot is engaged only a few hundred feet after takeoff, and is pretty much held there until only a few couple hundred feet before they land. You can land in a commercial airliner in 0-0 nowadays. So why not take that technology and advance it to something like an eVTOL? But again, the aircraft will aviate autonomously, but with that ground-based operator, that connected system on the ground that was going to provide over-the-loop navigation, communication if needed. We can do voice communication with air traffic control and oversight. So it's really more of a supervised autonomy. Someday we could get to total autonomy, but obviously that would probably be a bridge too far for my colleagues in the FAA. A little bit about the ecosystem. Here's a typical journey that we would envision. A rider would register through an app. He or she would then pick where they want to go, arrive at check-in at the vertiport, do a quick pre-flight inspection with somebody on the ground, go over all the emergency protocols, get in and go on their way. They will be able to communicate as they go with somebody on the ground if needed. Post-flight, depart and leave and go on their journey. Some of the elements that are in that ecosystem. So obviously we will provide the aircraft. We will also provide the Fleet Operations Center. And then externally, there'll be vertiports that'll be managed on their own, and we can use them to kind of manage the operating sites. Obviously, you will have air traffic control. To start, we would absolutely envision voice communications using the existing air traffic control, but we'd very much like to see it modernize and evolve over time with something that maybe like a supplemental data provider or a UAM service provider, a PSU as it were. So a lot of things in the pike coming down that could really allow this industry to scale and move forward. But all of it is going to be connected, which is going to be key. Some of the challenges, of which there are plenty, but specifically to airspace, is the classification and rules of airspace. Obviously, existing flight rules, VFR, which we can't be because we don't have any visual. No one's on board to look out the window, even as limited our eyes are. They don't support autonomous operations. There's also a backlog in time in approving IFR flight routes. So if we use a helicopter IFR route, like a TK or a ZK route, it takes time to get that approved through the FAA system. Another thing is air traffic control. Obviously, existing operations are much structured upon a pilot being on board the aircraft and communicating. High reliance of voice communication. Now, as I mentioned, we can communicate, just not through the aircraft. It'll be from the people on the ground. C2 links and comm networks. Obviously, there's a lot of gaps that are going to need to be addressed, and we're working diligently with our industry and SDO partners. But obviously, how do you certify it? What is your means of compliance to get them on the aircraft and certified? Vertiport, ground and surrounding airspace. Obviously, you have a lot of things around charging. What is the airspace and ground management systems look not only on the vertiport but around it? Procedures to and from those heliports will be designed, including an autonomous aircraft, so down all the way down to the FADO or the TLOF, and then compatibility with VTOLs. We have again a lot of helicopter flight procedures, but most of those are reliant on a visual segment that is going to be ending it. And then obviously providers of service for UAM or a PSU really see that as the next step that's going to be needed, not necessarily for our entry into service, but absolutely needed for the whole ecosystem to scale and become reliable. There are some things on our website, by all means, that you can download. We want to be open, we want to be transparent, so we have a bunch of white papers, including how we intend to use existing infrastructure around heliports, airports as mobility hubs. You know, we've done a lot of work on societal acceptance of autonomy, so that's a nice white paper. And obviously, you know, taking mobility using autonomous. We recently did a new one that was just published as well, talking about simulation and using that to really scale and drive and test AAM prior to launch. So that's out there as well. And that was it for me. So again, safe, everyday flight for everyone. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Fred. What I really liked about your speech is you said it's going to be affordable to everybody, including civil servants like me. So that's a good idea.
I'll second that. I drove in from Kettering, so the 3.5 hour trip, if I could have just made that an hour and a half, would have been amazing. Fred Judson, director of the Ohio UAS Center and Test Complex. I'll give a little bit of background on myself, and then how I've been inspired in some of the work that I've done with both these gentlemen as we've matured in our thinking of uncrewed aircraft systems and how we've steered the state to advance air mobility. So I started back in 2012. So 27 years at the Department of Transportation. My background was more, majority of it was geographic information systems to start with. So I didn't even have an aeronautical background. But I had an intern that sent me this YouTube video of this 1-pound styrofoam plane that you could fly around and get aerial photography, and it was completely automated. I said, wow, that's really cool. So I went to my boss's office and I said, hey, I want to buy a drone and take aerial photography. He said, that's great, you're fired, get out of my office. But he was teasing, obviously, and gave me the approval to go ahead and purchase it. So the next agency I called was the FAA. He said, hey, I want to get a drone to take aerial photography. Oh, that's fine. The only thing you have to do is get this thing called a certificate of authorization. You'll be set to go. What I didn't understand is what all it would take to get a certificate of authorization. So me being not smart enough not to ask questions, I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing until we figured out how to get past our first certificate of authorization in 2012, right at the end of 2012. From that, with my processing background, a lot of the questions were really geographically oriented, so I figured out, went back and used my server tools and figured out ways I could automate the process with the FAA and generate all the information I needed to copy and paste and to get approvals from the FAA for this aircraft. So I'm working with my Center Service representative, and I submit 7 certificate of authorizations in one day. But sure enough, an hour later, I got a phone call, and it was Chewy was his call sign. And Chewy calls me up, and he's like, "Fred, what are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You just submitted 7 in one day. Nobody has ever submitted 7 in one day. Why did you do that?" I said, "Well, I didn't know. It's a good thing you called, because I had 11 to actually submit." So after that, the FAA came out with the test center bids for the different states to get their test center designations. And they formed what's called the Ohio-Indiana UAS Center and Test Complex. And they are sitting in a cabinet meeting, and they said, "Is anybody else doing unmanned aircraft systems?" Well, sure enough, I was the only one that had been doing it, and some people knew that was actually in the meeting. And they said, "Hey, come work for us and help us out with our bid." So about 60 COAs later, and a lot more gray hair, I finally ended up being the director of the UAS Center. In that time, it was about 14, and I learned about PK's UTM efforts, and I said, that's something that we need. And so contacting PK, and that was back about 14 is when we started talking UTM, and we kicked off some projects to support that. And then I come across a YouTube video of the Kitty Hawk Flyer, which was one of the earlier versions of the Wisk aircraft. And a famous YouTuber named Casey Neistat was actually flying, and he's like, "I don't even need a pilot's license because it's under Part 103. I'm like, "Wow, that's really cool." My eyes opened up. Another one that was out there too is a black fly opener. I'm like, "Oh, there's some things that are changing in aviation." As being part of the Department of Transportation, we're focused on the safe and efficient movement of people and goods. That does not mean it's only on the ground. We also cover air, and we also cover some maritime and rail too. And I said, we really need to start paying attention to this. This is something that's going to start happening. And so about 17 is when we started gearing all of our programs around that. The numbers that you're seeing on this slide here is actually from our Advanced Air Mobility Economic Impact Analysis. It doesn't actually say that in the title because we actually started this before NASA decided to coin Advanced Air Mobility. So this is, we needed to define the problem and what does it look like for the state as we start moving into the future. So this is a public document. It was done about a year ago. It's out there talking about all the numbers of jobs in different areas advanced air mobility means for the state. It's just do a Google search, and I don't know if these will be available to you afterwards. The link's also live on this too. But the economic impact analysis is out there for you guys to read and what advanced air mobility means for Ohio. Another thing that we have coming up, I actually sent in my final comments last week, and it was finalized last week, is our Advanced Air Mobility Planning Framework. That's trying to educate our legislative representatives, our transportation officials on what we need to start looking for. The aviation industry is going to change a lot in 10 years. And when we look at our MPOs and they start doing their future planning, they're looking 5 to 10 years out. They really need to start understanding that there's major changes coming in aviation, and we need to educate them. So that's what the purpose and the intent of this document. It's kind of lengthy. I think it was like 80-some pages. And I got some pushback on the number of pages that this document was. My answer back was, if you're actually making your decision maker and you need to, you're forming your programs around transportation, and you think advanced air mobility might be something you should be interested in, probably should spend the time on the 80-some pages. But on the right-hand side are some of the notional type activities that might take place. So we're working around like potential use cases and the kind of thought process you need to have when you want to enable these kind of activities, whether it's regional air, cargo freight delivery, on-demand aerial air taxi services, or whatever. But that should be, it's actually done. They were waiting on my comments, and it took forever to get my revisions, so I apologize. It should have been out like 2 months ago. But it's done, and it should be released to the public here in the next week or so. But I want to communicate what our vision is for advanced air mobility. It's not just VTOL. It could be automated conventional takeoff and landing, could even be short takeoff and landing aircraft. But when we want to look at in the future and how aviation's changing, we want to make sure that we cover all the concepts and not just one or the other. Here's another, and these are all again from the our planning framework document, which you guys will be able to see here in the next week or two. And then the different types of aircraft again that we're looking at, not focusing on just one specific type. We also, when we're communicating advanced air mobility, we're also looking at the small aircraft, unmanned aircraft, even though they're not represented here, the scaled down versions, whether they're used for beyond line of sight data collection activities or even package delivery type services. So we talked a little bit about having pilots in, pilots out, remotely piloted. Again, when we're looking at the full gamut of aviation and how the aircraft industry is changing, realizing that we will have piloted, optionally piloted, remotely piloted, one remote pilot to multiple aircraft to eventually that autonomous state is where we are heading into the future. And things that my job is for the Department of Transportation is to help support. All right. There are 4 areas that we see are key enablers for advanced air mobility. 3 of those on the right-hand side that you're looking at are the ones that we're really concentrating on. In realizing that if we are providing services and infrastructure that help the 3 on the right-hand side, will eventually help aircraft OEMs in that aircraft certification piece with the FAA. Detect and avoidance, we spend a lot of time on that piece here in Ohio. So to give you an idea how forward-looking the Ohio Department of Transportation is, we have 3 radar systems that we actually operate around the Columbus area. One of those radar systems is actually on top of our ODOT headquarters, overseeing urban area Columbus, supporting that 1 hour or last mile package type delivery services. There isn't another Department of Transportation, to my knowledge anyways, that has a radar on top of their headquarters. So I think that's pretty forward-looking. Under my table of organizations supporting these detect and avoidance efforts, I have 2 air traffic controllers, retired air traffic controllers under my table of organization. I don't know any other Department of Transportations that do that kind of detect and avoidance and actually have air traffic controllers that work for them. Additionally, the green area that you're seeing underneath that detect and avoidance is our Sky Vision area. So if anybody hasn't heard of Ohio Sky Vision, that is a ground-based detect and avoid system that we have with in cooperation with the Air Force Research Labs out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, that we are able to do beyond line-of-sight operations of unmanned aircraft of any size without any visual observers. So it's actually true beyond line of sight in that 200 square mile area just southeast of the Springfield Airport. So detect and avoidance, that's some of the ways that we're actually helping the industry and trying to generate more advanced air mobility operations in Ohio. Another area is command and control, where we want to make sure command and control is available, reliable, redundant, and secure, hitting all those marks to make sure that we're able to fly. And I'll talk about some of our NASA engagements where we're working on that C2 piece with here in NASA Glenn as well. And then lastly, if we're providing these services and we want to make sure all the operations are going to be conducted safely. The other key area is in-time aviation safety management systems, of which we have another annex with NASA on under our Space Act agreement. And this is the last slide I promised, because I know you guys are getting tired of hearing from me, but ACO3. So a year and a half ago, we went for the Community Integration for Advanced Air Mobility Space Act agreement with NASA. We were accepted under that Space Act agreement. We had ACO3 for that, which should be wrapped up this summer. Under ATMX, according to our proposal, we wrapped several demonstrations around community engagement and operations in Ohio. In those discussions of those demonstrations, we caught the interest of ATMX, system-wide safety, and NASA under Davis on use cases. Now we've got two more annexes that we've added, and another two that are in discussion. So with NASA, with ATMX under the PAVE group, when we're looking at an annex for C2 in Ohio, that's in NASA for final review. For airspace integration with the PAVE group for rural cargo deliveries, we actually had that signed just a few weeks ago, 6/14 in 2022. System-wide safety for in-time aviation safety management systems we signed last month, or 2 months ago almost. And then we're looking at healthcare concept of operations. Through the FAA, we're looking at standardizing ODAA through their Office of Safety under the Integration Office. And that's that little chart that you see at the bottom, where we're hoping their DAA will eventually be certified. Industry references the DAA as part of their co-applications, and they continue their operations. And with that, I want to end with to make sure everybody knows. Last November, we had the Advanced Air Mobility Showcase. August 22nd and 23rd, we have the Industry Advanced Air Mobility Industry Forum. AAMOhio.com. I encourage you guys, if you're interested, we'll have several vehicle OEMs on display. Leadership from NASA, FAA, and the DoD will all be there. It's going to be a great event, and I encourage everybody to be there for that. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to ask one question to both of you, and then we'll go to the audience questions. I have several questions, but we'll want to give audience opportunity to ask questions. So, David, this question, and this is a really interesting how innovation starts. So, why did Larry start at the time it was Zero, other than spend? He had a lot of money, and he needed place to spend somewhere. But why? What was his motivating factor that he felt that this is a really cool idea, and or we need to start something like this?
It's a great question, and to be candid, I don't know. But I think aviation is just. I mean, we were all involved in aviation. There's a pull, there's an intrigue to aviation. If you look at Larry's, yes, of course, he started the history of Wisk is we started out as a very stealth company called Z Aero, and then we moved into Kitty Hawk, and then we moved into Cora, and then when we did the joint venture with Boeing, we became Wisk. Now, why Larry decided just to tinker around, I don't know, because I mean he had Google X to kind of play around as well. But if you look at aviation, I mean, you look at Joby. Joe Ben made a bunch of money with camera holders, and started up Joby just because I mean there's that intrigue. You look at Sir Richard Branson with Virgin. It's just there is a pull. There's an intrigue. I think there's an inherent desire to fly. I'm a pilot. I started flying when I was in high school. It just there's something about the sensation of flying, and that's what I hope to bring to people who fly on Wisk. I think I've worked in, as you mentioned, GA for a long time, and I started, when people started recruiting me, when Lilium actually reached out, it got me thinking. I mean, general aviation, great asset, national asset, should be protected by all means, because protect that freedom to fly, go build an airplane in your basement and go fly it. But the fact that, I don't know if my kids are going to be interested in go flying a 1960 152 that has analog gauges. What's the next thing? What's the next thing that's going to really revitalize aviation? And I think AAM really has the potential. I mean, the fact that you can get in one of these things, don't even have to fly it. And then how does that translate to GA? Can you get into the next Cessna and not have to have all the skills, knowledge, and risk management that keeps you safe? And then now the aircraft keeps you safe. I think there's the potential that AAM really poses is going to be awesome. So that's what gets me excited.
All right, thank you. So Fred, this question, so you gave a great presentation of how many activities you have and the type of details you're working with NASA. What use cases you see in Ohio that are really important for any state really, but Ohio particularly?
By far, the healthcare use case, emergency services, we see as being the strong initial pushes in that either cargo or people moving both. I mean, we actively engage, particularly through our DriveOhio partner, every healthcare network in Ohio. And there is always a want or a pain point in their logistics. If you look at healthcare companies as being more logistics companies rather than healthcare companies, I mean, they have a strong logistics presence, and there's a lot of issues in their logistics that have that not only help them out as like a network, but also have that public good piece to it. Additionally, a lot of the larger ones already have aviation programs. So we see the existing aviation assets they have, and then making that transition to whether it could be uncrewed aircraft or piloted eVTOLs, but we see them being that early adopters and something that we need to target. But then if you look at the bleed over in the use case, not only for the public good, but also the use cases with the DoD on a medical type services, it could be supporting battlefield for medical response. They have that one too. So there's a good tie-in then between public and military as well.
Great, thank you. Let's go to audience and see if there are any questions. There's a mic on this side and mic on this side. You can either go to left wing or right wing, depending on your preference.
Port and starboard.
So, sorry if this is fairly simple kind of question, but it seems like there's a lot of different overlapping levels of risk that are happening all at the same time when we're talking about this. So there's the infrastructure risk of the actual flights themselves, plus then any of the control systems, plus you have any other additional exposures that people might have due to what's on the cargo at the same time. Is there a way of looking at how all of those are interacting with each other? Or is that something that is needed for this to really start moving to that next level?
Great question, and multiple risks, multiple things need to be done in parallel. And I think that's where NASA really plays a key role with the ecosystem and the kind of the the multi-copter that PK had, because we can't do this sequentially. We can't burn through money to certify an aircraft like traditionally it would be done. We would certify the aircraft, then we would get the infrastructure. If you look at like the A380, when that was entered into service, airports modified their jet bridges, their infrastructure, their taxiways, their runways to be ready for when that aircraft came. When it was certified, the crew was already trained, it became operational, and then it flew into the airports because everything was ready. I think we need to do the exact same thing with AAM, and they're really key to have NASA, PK, FAA, everyone at the table. We have consortiums here in DC, not here, in DC, that really help drive that, and we're working on some legislations to kind of help with that. One of the key things is what we call the AAM Coordination and Leadership Act. It gets all of the departments of the government talking to each other so we can de-risk, and that's exactly the name of the game, is de-risk right now.
You want to add anything, Fred? Yeah, so what I'll just say from the NASA side, we have taken the ecosystem approach. Also, there are papers on innovation ecosystem and such, but other than the foundational papers, so the ecosystem approach we took, and we said, okay, in order to make the urban air mobility reality, we developed a scale called Urban Air Mobility Maturity Level along the lines of Technology Readiness Levels, TRL, that NASA has championed for decades now. So the part of the UML, Urban Air Mobility Maturity Levels, is to look at pieces that need to be in place. So aircraft, its certification and approval for flying. Then airspace system to make sure that we can enter into airspace without hindrance to other aircraft in a safe manner. And then community integration, which includes infrastructure. And our hypothesis there is that it doesn't do us any good if aircraft is ready, but airspace system is not ready, or airspace system is ready, but the community integration is not ready. So we build a maturity level scale 1 to 6, and our goal is to get to urban air mobility maturity level 4 by 2032, which is medium density, medium complexity. UML1 will be around 2024 to 26, depending on when the first certificated aircraft enters. But we want to get all pieces simultaneously working together so that the whole ecosystem flourishes and we can scale these operations. That's the fundamental thesis behind taking an ecosystem approach.
Great.
Yeah, next question.
Hi, yeah, I spent just shy of 20 years working and leading Army robotics and autonomy. And one of the
You
things.
should work for NASA.
And then I came to NASA. I didn't think there was anything cooler I could do, and now I'm here. So one of our nemesis was certifying and autonomy software. Right? How do you ensure that there's no corner case that's going to wreak havoc? And so we had to work with the certification community and within the Army to do that, and it ended up going towards line by line code, which is literally impossible to do, especially with software versioning. But luckily for us, the Chief of Staff of the Army at the time said, "Hey, safety community, figure it out," and they did. I don't think that exists within working with the FAA. So I mean, in terms of going forward with autonomy and certifying this software, is that being addressed now, or is that going to be a multi-decade fight?
Great question, and so hopefully not multi-decade, but it is being worked right now. So there's various standards designs organization, probably RTCA is one of the leading ones, especially for the software. But that's one of the key things is the technical standards and the certification and the means of compliance. There's a couple things in addition to RTCA, but ASTM International is doing a lot of work. But it's one of the long poles in the tent, no doubt about it. But the FAA is at the table. There's going to be an autonomy workshop, technical workshop here next month in DC, so trying to get as much clarity as possible. Having said that, though, in addition to getting the software certified and through the various SDOs, we fully embrace SMS, safety management systems, and so we will be using SMS to the greatest extent possible from the manufacturing, the operational side as well, and that goes all the way down to the software. So we'll get there, hopefully not a couple decades, but sooner rather than later. We'll see.
And if you are interested more on that topic, please feel free to contact me. I'll give you connections with our system-wide safety project team, who is focused, one part of that, their team is focused on making sure that autonomous systems can be assured with different new methods and techniques. So, one more question. Yes. Hey, Scott.
Hey, PK, Fred. Thank you for the presentation. There's a lot of congressional support for AAM broadly across the country. I deal with states all over the country as well as here in Ohio. But one common denominator I hear from members and staff is concern about noise levels. So could you talk a little bit about how producers are factoring that in, or organizations are figuring out the appropriate noise level as more vehicles are flying over cities and things? That's a very common complaint from members, or concern, I should say. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Community integration and noise. That's a tough one, because it's not just audible, right? It's visual too. More knowledge to the communities is better than less, and trying to communicate, whether that's a virtual or getting them out to actually see the aircraft operate is I think the key, at least to give people somewhat of an understanding so we can make more informed decisions. And it really does come down to the community itself and whether or not they want or where they want operations to happen. And so that's been tough, though, because industry keeps promising quieter, like way quieter aircraft, but without actually seeing them operate, it's difficult for an average person to understand what does that mean. And so focusing a lot of our demonstrations, actual demonstrations around our community engagement helps out a ton. Because when the aircraft is up, gets to altitude 1,000, 2,000 feet. For most of these electric aircraft, you're not hearing them. And once people start realizing that, then they get more comfortable with it. So here in Ohio, a lot of what makes us different is focusing around actual demonstrations, and like the event that's coming up on the 22nd and 23rd, or the event that happened last November, is open to the public to have them come out to get that firsthand experience.
For community acceptance. And so I've had the privilege of seeing two of these aircraft, the Lilium aircraft and Wisk, take off. And obviously takeoff is the loudest and most, but it was remarkably quieter than I expected, and only going to get further quieter as we certify. We want to be friendly. But we also. I was talking to a gentleman from one of the drone delivery companies. I won't name their name, but he said, it's the fear of the unknown. So I think the best way to combat the noise issue, the community acceptance, is to demonstrate, to see it, to hear it, or not hear it. So I think the more that we get out there, the more the people actually see these aircraft. I think there will always be complaints, no matter what. But I think if they see the benefit, not only the in transportation, but the humanitarian missions, the missions that drones are doing with medical transport, the ability to get, and so you need to weigh that benefit to the noise or the nuisance. But as long as there's a perceived benefit, and again, we are taking people off the roads. We're taking people, the buses, CO2 emissions. We're making transportation systems green, and then we're hopefully going to connect it to other modes of transportation. So it's going to be an interconnected system. And I think as long as you provide that benefit and at a low noise, which I can promise you it will be, I think you're going to get there.
And as part of NASA's national campaign, we are studying the noise metrics in a very aggressive way, making sure that we have really good understanding of aircraft performance and the noise, as well as part of NASA's revolutionary vertical lift technology project. We have methods and scientific research to reduce the footprint of the noise. So we have a number of key activities going on in that direction as well. So we hope to make sure that these will be acceptable as we go along. But there will be a noise standard akin to other noise standards.
Excellent. Well, PK, Brett, David, thank you very, very much. That was a great discussion. Appreciate it. Thank you.